Boker Tov, good morning, Rechavia, Nachlaot, and Yerushalayim, and it could be good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and whenever you'll be listening to this class. Just before we start, I want to mention that it's Tuesday today, so tonight at 7:30 p.m. Jerusalem time, in the very same Zoom room, and also on Facebook Live, we're going to continue the chapter 27 in the Tanya of Seriously Happy. Please join us and spread the word. Also, there's an opportunity to sponsor these classes, the daily classes, and also the weekly classes on Tuesday evening, including also Kabbalah Cafe on Friday mornings. So if you would like to sponsor a class in honor of someone or in memory of a loved one, please let me know. You can send me a WhatsApp message or an email at rabbi@jerusalemchabad.org. And it would be a great zechut, a great honor and a merit for you to sponsor this and have tens and sometimes hundreds of people watching this video every day, Baruch Hashem. Over the past several classes, we've been discussing the subject of the relationship between the mashpia and the mekabel, he who delivers and he who receives. The classical example is of a teacher in a class or teaching students. The teacher wants to deliver as much as possible to the student, but if the teacher delivers too much, then the student may get lost. Therefore, the teacher must hide, must conceal within himself as much as possible of the teaching, in order that when he gives a little bit of a diluted message to the student will be able to capture it. And here's the punchline. The punchline is that this is not a concealment for the teacher, for he who is delivering. It is a concealment exclusively for the one who is receiving. And this is a message for us when it comes to the name of Havaya and the name of Elokim. The name of Hashem, Havaya, Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, that is revelation, giving, like Chesed. And Elokim is restraint. So for Hashem, there really is no restraint. It's only for the receiver, for us, for the human beings. We are the ones that it seems to be that it's a constraint for us, and therefore it is it's a challenge for us to try to receive as much revelation as possible. Now, I remember when I was of bar mitzvah age in 1990, I just gave my age away. And I remember that I just started to listen as a young boy to the Rebbe's Farbrengens. And the Rebbe's talks were in Yiddish. And on the 10th of Shvat, which is going to be in approximately 2.5 months, a little more, about 3 months. So this was the 40th celebration of the Rebbe's leadership and anniversary of the Rebbe's father-in-law's passing. So the Rebbe's father-in-law, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, was the previous Rebbe, the 6th Rebbe, and he passed away on a Shabbos in 1950. It was January time. And naturally, automatically, the Rebbe took on the leadership of Chabad. But for the first year, the Rebbe did not officially assume leadership upon himself. It's a long story. Hopefully, we'll do a Farbrengen about that one day. But regarding our subject that we're discussing right now, the Rebbe had a Farbrengen for Yud Shvat, the 10th of Shvat, and he gave a talk. And the Rebbe quoted what it says in the Zohar, that Arba'in Shnin Koim Inish Adaita Derabe. That was Aramaic. So they're not going to teach you these words in your ulpan, unless you travel to Dubai on the next jumbo plane that's going to Dubai. Then you might speak some Aramaic. But what does it mean, what the Zohar says? When someone is 40 years old, then you start having a proper understanding of what your teacher said. Now, on the simple level, it means that the Mishnah says at the end of the 5th chapter in Pirkei Avot, in the Ethics of Our Fathers, the Mishnah says, Ben 13 mitzvot, you're 13 years old, you do mitzvahs. Ben Arbaim lebina, 40 years old, you have bina. What's bina? Bina is understanding. In other words, you could be very wise at a younger age, at a younger age too. But when it comes to settling down and being more calm and being able to understand something on a much greater level, so the fact that you are 40 years old, that already gives you an ability to understand your teacher's teachings at a much greater level. What is it based on? It's based on what it says in the end of Parashat Kitavo, which we read about 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah every year. The Moshe Rabbeinu, it's right at the end of the 40 years of traveling in the desert, right before Moshe is about to pass away. And Moshe says as follows to Am Yisrael, V'lo haya lachem lev ladat ve'einayim lirot ve'aznayim lishmoa ad hayom hazeh. That means that you did not have eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart to understand, to feel, ad hayom hazeh, until this day. What does that mean? That means that after 40 years, as we're saying now, which this is the basis of the Zohar, we don't really have a proper deep understanding of the teachings of Moshe Rabbeinu. But once we've experienced already 40 years, that already gives us an opportunity to be able to appreciate and internalize and to dissect and to appreciate those teachings that we may have learned many times beforehand. But the fact itself that there's a 40-year period, not only being 40 years of age per se, but the fact itself there's a 40-year period, that itself hopefully gives a person a much better opportunity to be able to understand their teacher's teachings on a much deeper level. So I'm standing there in Toronto and I'm listening to the Rebbe's talk on the anniversary, the 40th, getting back to the number 40, to the 40th anniversary of his father-in-law's passing and essentially of his own leadership. And so I'm thinking to myself as a young child, I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm only barely 13. It was just before my bar mitzvah. And I felt that perhaps I'm not part of this because I have not yet experienced the 40 year. I'm not 40 yet, and I haven't had 40 years of hearing the Rebbe's teachings, understanding how the Rebbe's teachings can really talk to me. And then if I remember correctly, it was the Rebbe that explained, or perhaps it was something that I learned later on from the Rebbe. But here's the explanation. The explanation is, this is very, very deep, so please put on your thinking caps. When we talk about 40 years, on the most basic level, you need to be 40, at least associated with the number 40, in order to understand your teacher's teachings properly, especially when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu or the Rebbe, a great tzaddik. But on a deeper level, the Rebbe explained that this is the point. You don't need to be 40 itself. Are you ready for this? The fact itself that the teacher is on the level of 40, has already accomplished the idea of 40, in our case 40 years of leadership, that already gives an opportunity for anyone connected to the Rebbe, anyone connected to the teacher, to be able to understand and appreciate his teachings on a very deep level. And for me personally, that was very encouraging, that even at a younger age, I can hopefully be connected, hit kashrut, be connected to the Rebbe, because, quote unquote, he has already accomplished, he has reached the level of 40, being the Rebbe for 40 years. Now let's see how that applies to us, to our teachings over here. We're at the bottom of we're at the top of page Mem Tet, if you have the original text. About 8 lines down. Ukemo Mishnah, just like the Mishnah, Sheshana Lanu Rabbeinu HaKadosh, like the Mishnah that Rebbe Yehuda HaNasi taught us. Harei zeh hakitzur mikol arichut hapilpul v'ha'omek. This is the shorter version of all of the lengthy, deep teachings. Orech v'rochav, the length and the breadth. Shehaya etzlam b'ha'inyan, that they had in their concept. Shana lanu kol zeh Rabbeinu HaKadosh b'lashon ha'mishnah b'kitzur nimratz. Shiyeh lefi arkenu. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the author of the Mishnah, the holy Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, he was able to package, to condense all of the lengthy discussions that the rabbis, that the Tanaim, the other authors of the Mishnah, have had for the past few hundred years, and he put them into small Mishnahs, at short concepts. Omnam be'emet, however, truthfully, Yesh b'lashon ha-Mishnah, in this small text of the Mishnah, we have kol omek orech v'rochav pnimiyut v'atzmiyut chochmatam. In this text of the Mishnah, we have the entire depth and the essence of the chochma of our sages. Well, kamosha the Gemara, just like in the Gemara, remember we said that you can have a little Mishnah and a few pages of Talmud, just explaining those couple of lines of Mishnah. So just like in the Talmud, that afterwards we have all of the details, mevur achar kach pratei lashon ha-Mishnah, the details of the text of the Mishnah, be'omek orech v'rochav, in the depth, length, and breadth of the teaching. However, ubeha Mishnah, in the Mishnah itself, hu behelim, it's concealed, condensed. We don't see the revelation of all of this explanation. Kmo kain, now we get back to the idea and to the concept, hu behashpat haseichel, when someone, a teacher, delivers an intellectual teaching, shehamashpia malim bahashefa, that the deliverer, the teacher, conceals within the deliverance, kol omek chochmato, all of the depth of his wisdom. Ella, only, shehu ne'ela me'hamakabel, it's only technically concealed from the receiver. In order that the receiver should be able to receive, he had to conceal a little bit of his, or the entire depth of his intellect, of his teaching. Uma shemeir begilui, and that which is which shines in its revelation, hu chitzoniyut hasechel, it's only the external part of the teaching, masha lefi arko, what's according to his kelim, his ability to be able to understand. Okay. Ubemet. And just 1 second. Nimta, what do we see over here? Shalagabea mashpia, for the mashpia, for the teacher, ain't kan shum helam v'hester klal. There is no concealment, only for the receiver. Ube'emet, and truthfully, at the bottom of page memtet, gam omek pnimiut hasechel, even the depth of the inner part of the teaching, shalamashpia, of the teacher, meir umitgale lamakabel, it does shine and light to the receiver, al yidei hashpa mashpia lo, through the deliverance that he shares with the student. Excuse me for a moment. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. L'chaim to everyone, and thank you to Raya and Mordechai. Shaharei Amar Zal, for our sages have taught us, Lo kaim inish adaite de Rabbe. This is the introduction that we gave to this class. A person does not properly appreciate and understand the da'at, the teaching of his teacher, ad arba'im shnin, until 40 years. Aval liachar arba'im shnin. However, after the 40 years, then a person can understand the depth, which means, this the Rebbe Rashab is going to explain in a moment, that since the depth of the teacher is enveloped into the deliverance, even though it might be external, but it's right there, deeply hidden inside the teaching that the teacher did deliver to the student. Therefore, it enables him that after 40 years, it should come out. And that explains what we said earlier, that even though a person might not have experienced the 40 years, but if there is a special connection with a teacher, since the depth is really there, it's a question of time, or it's a question of practicality, logistics, but eventually it will come out. Because it's really all there. The depth really, really is there. Upirush daite de Rabbi. What does it mean that the student does not understand the depth of the understanding of the teaching of the teacher? Hainu, that means pinimiyut, the innermost part of his teaching, the atzmiyut kavanato, and the essence of his intention. Ukamayim Razal, as our sages teach us in the Talmud, Gabe Rabbi Meir, about the great sage Rabbi Meir, Shelo yachlu chachamim la'amod al sof da'ato, that his friends, the sages, were unable to understand the quote-unquote end of his understanding. What does it mean, his end, the extreme, the ultimate of his understanding? Upirish Rashi, and Rashi interprets al etzem kavanato, on the essence of his kavanah. So Rabbi Meir was known as a very, very sharp man. And pretty much across the board, any time that Rabbi Meir had discussions with his colleagues, the other Tanaim, the halacha, the ruling, goes according to the Chachamim, the other sages. However, now what's the reason? I'll continue the however in a moment. What's the reason? The reason is because we only rule according to something that we understand. And that's usually what the majority is. Like, for example, Hillel and Shammai. The majority of the rabbis were able to understand the rationale of Hillel and Beit Hillel. Same thing is with Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim and our sages and the sages. Because the Chachamim were unable very often to understand Sof Da'ato, the depth and the essence of his understanding, so they couldn't rule if they didn't understand what he was saying. However, when Mashiach comes, now we get back to the however, the halacha will be according to Shammai, the house of Shammai, and Rabbi Meir and the other sages, which were so deep, because we have a rule that we cannot rule if we don't. If we cannot make a halachic ruling if we don't really understand it properly. So therefore, until Mashiach's coming, which we're not ultimately so wise, so we have to rule based on the halacha, what we understand, what the majorities of the rabbis of each generation understand. But when it comes to Mashiach's coming, the Rambam teaches us right at the end of the VeYadaata Chazaka, in the last paragraph. U'b'oto hazman, in that time, when Mashiach will come, hopefully this moment, Yiyu Yisrael chachamim gedolim, Am Yisrael will be very wise, v'yasigu dat bor'am kefi koach ha'adam. We will grasp the knowledge of our Creator according to how much human being can understand. And every moment is going to be deeper and deeper. So if we're going to be so wise, then some of the halachas might change, not because the Torah changes. God forbid, the Torah never changes. But the same Torah that taught us what the halacha is up until now, the same Torah teaches us and tells us that we have to abide by our sages in that generation. And if the Sanhedrin, the Beit Din of each time is wiser and also larger in number, then we rule like them. Unfortunately, because of Yeridat HaDorot, as generations go further and further, we are less capable. So therefore, we stick to the halacha that we were taught a couple thousand years ago, a couple hundred years ago. But when Mashiach will come, we will be, in this context, Koim Adaite. We will be able to understand and appreciate the depth of the knowledge of what we were being taught, even by the greatest and deepest rabbis like Shammai and Rabbi Meir, and therefore we will be able to appreciate their teachings. So that's what it means at the age of 40. The simple meaning is, as we started the lesson, the simple meaning is at the age of 40, a person already has the settled mind, the settled sechel to be able to understand and grasp the teachings of their teacher, because they've already reached a level of 40 years. It's much better understood, according to the other teaching, that if you've learned your teacher's teachings for 40 years, for the course of 40 years, then for sure you've reached the level of Koim Adaite de Rabbe, Achrei Arba'im Shnin, like it says in the Zohar, that after 40 years, you've reached the level of understanding of your teacher. And so therefore, this is the idea of Havaya and Elokim. We say that for Havaya, for Hashem's perspective, as far as revelation is concerned, there really is no concealment. Because like we said in the example, for the teacher, as a teacher is teaching, for the teacher there's no real concealment whatsoever. But for the student, it's the revelation is concealed, but it's there. The student has the ability one day to be able to reveal the concealed light and revelation. And therefore, that's encouraging that even though now the only revelation of Hashem is through Shem Elokim, which is condensing and concealment, nevertheless, the harder we work, the more revelation we'll be able to have of Shem Havaya. Thank you so much for joining us. Bezrat Hashem, I look forward to seeing you right here in our Zoom room and Facebook Live of Chabad Rechavia this evening, Jerusalem time, 7:30 p.m. And Bezrat Hashem, if anybody wants to sponsor one of these in the morning classes or evening classes, you're welcome to let me know. It would be a great honor and a great zechut for us, for you to do so. And we look forward to seeing you, Bezrat Hashem, in the coming days, as always. Thank you very much. All the best.